So this is going to be by far the shortest recap I've done on this channel, but that's alright, because the size doesn't matter, of your video of course, but it's all about how you use it, and I plan on using it well. During the CRL World Championship, OCE and MENA wrapped up their regular season, and they figured out who's going to be representing their team at the major. So let's get into the recap. Starting off in OCE, we came into this last regional with the same story that we had all split. Ground Zero, Pioneers, and Power were all fighting for the region's 2 spots at the upcoming Spring Major. And since all 3 of those teams were tied in points heading into this event, this race literally could not be any tighter. But Ground Zero had a huge advantage coming into this event because they were the number 1 seed for this tournament, which meant they could go all the way to the upper bracket finals without facing Pioneers or Power. And that's exactly what they did because they made it all the way to that point without dropping a single game. And the expectation for that upper bracket final was that Ground Zero would face off against the winner of Pioneers vs Power in the round before, because that's exactly what happened in the first 2 spring events. But that didn't happen in this event because one other team decided to take the spotlight away from the other 2 teams in OCE's top 3. Serani, a team featuring Pagsy, Finn, and Fades, had one of the most unexpected runs we've seen all season. In the second round of this event, they beat Power in the Game 5 overtime to knock them into the lower bracket on the very first day of the tournament. And in the next round, Serani went up against Pioneers, and they looked even more impressive in this series than they did in their series against Power, because after they dropped Game 1, Serani won 4 straight games, 3 of them being in overtime, to lock in their spot in the upper bracket final against Ground Zero. And while Serani had to be very happy about this win, Ground Zero was probably just as happy, because now that Pioneers and Power had both lost early in the tournament, they would have to face each other for a chance to get into the top 3. Meanwhile, Ground Zero had already locked in their spot in the top 3. And because of that, Ground Zero was already confirmed for the Spring Major. So this region's first spot was decided a lot faster than we thought it would be. And on Championship Sunday, it was time to decide the second one, because Pioneers and Power both won their lower bracket matchups to meet up in the lower bracket semifinal to decide who would be the second team out of this region making it to the major. And just like they did last event, Pioneers had to go through this Championship Sunday with their sub Tango taking Hunter's place. But I'm sure they weren't too upset about that because that didn't stop them from winning the whole regional last time around. But now that both of these teams had everything to play for, they gave us an incredibly tight series. Power took Game 1 and Pioneers took the next 2 games, getting a timeout out of Power while they were down 2 games to 1. Then Power took the next game to tie this series up at 2-2 going into Game 5. Scrub was the star of that Game 5 because he scored both goals for Pioneers to give them a 2-1 victory and put them on series point and major qualification point in Game 6. But Power wasn't fazed by the pressure. They scored the first 4 goals in that Game 6 to go on to a comfortable victory and send us into Game 7 in what would be the last series of the split for one of these teams. But Power took control in this game by going up 2-0 with just over a minute left. And while Pioneers did their best to fight back, it ended up being too little too late. And Power won this last game by a score of 3-2 to move on in the tournament and lock in their spot at the major. And even though they couldn't get the win here, Pioneers, and especially Tango, deserve a lot of credit for their performance. Playing with a sub during the most important series of the split would be a death sentence for a lot of teams. But not only did they manage to win an entire regional with him, but in the most important series of the split, they went all the way to Game 7 against Power, who despite their struggles at some points this season are still a really good team. So yeah, all of them deserve a lot of love for sure. Now wrapping up the rest of the regional, after Power ended Pioneer's run to the Spring Major, in the next round they ended Serani's Cinderella run to a regional championship, winning that lower bracket final in 6 games after taking the last 3 games of the series. But the grand final ended up being the place where Ground Zero proved that they are still probably the best team in the region. They won the grand final in 6 games, giving Ground Zero their first regional championship of this split. And this also gave Super Lucky his 4th regional championship after appearing in all 9 grand finals throughout this season. 3 of them with Pioneers in the fall split, and the other 6 with Ground Zero after that point. And now with the race to the major settled, we still have a very, very interesting race to the World Championship shaping out in this region. With these results, Ground Zero and Power are tied in overall points heading into the Spring Major, so whoever makes it farther in that major will be going to the World Championship. And if you thought that was interesting enough, take a look at this. Power and Ground Zero are right next to each other in the upper bracket, and the loser of their matches will play against each other in the lower bracket. So if Power and Ground Zero both lose to their NA counterparts, which honestly isn't that unlikely, that means we're going to see Ground Zero and Pioneers face off against each other in the first round of the lower bracket at the major, with the winner of that match going to the World Championship. And honestly, it doesn't get much more exciting than that for this region. Now going into the Middle East, we had 3 main contenders for the major spots in this region too, but instead of it being a flat top 3 like OCE was, it was more of a 2+1. Team Falcons and Rule 1 were the heavy favorites, but Senzo's Twisted Minds team was right there. If Rule 1 or Team Falcons won this event, then they were locked in for the major. And if Twisted Minds won, then they would also be locked in unless Rule 1 came second, in which case, Rule 1 and Twisted Minds would play a tiebreaker match. And after getting a win over Team Falcons and Rule 1 earlier in the split, you couldn't completely count them out. And they proved that to us at the first chance they got, because while Team Falcons went all the way to the upper bracket final as the 1 seed, Rule 1 and Twisted Minds had to face each other to find out who would be the team to face Falcons in that upper bracket final. And Twisted Minds took control of that series. They went up 3-0, getting a very early series point in a very important series. But Rule 1 wasn't done yet. They fought off the sweep by getting an overtime win in Game 4, then they got another close win in Game 5 to extend the series even more. Game 6 was a bit more lopsided, and the connection between the twins was on full display. Rawa scored all 4 goals, and Clears assisted all 4 of those goals, leading their team to a 4-0 shutout victory in Game 6, taking us all the way to Game 7, where they would try to finish off the reverse sweep. That Game 7 was a nail-biter that went all the way to overtime. But 19 seconds in, Rawas gets a double tap off of the back wall, missing the net in the process, but getting it into a spot where Clears can easily finish off the play and give Rule 1 a huge reverse sweep, putting them into the upper bracket final against Team Falcons. But after Rule 1 got a reverse sweep against Twisted Minds, I guess they wanted the next series to be less stressful. So this time they went ahead and got a regular sweep over Team Falcons, winning all 4 games. With the 2 best teams in the region facing off for an extra life in the grand finals to give them a much better chance of making it to the major, a lot of people might have expected a close series, but I guess Rule 1 just wasn't interested. But on the other hand, Twisted Minds was the team that just couldn't avoid a close series, because that's exactly what we saw when they went up against Falcons in the lower bracket final, to decide who would go up against Rule 1 in the grand finals. After trading the first 4 games, Falcons and Twisted Minds were tied at 2-2 heading into Game 5. And that Game 5 ended in a 1-0 victory for Twisted Minds, putting them on series point. And in the final seconds of Game 6, it looked like Twisted Minds were going to walk away with it, because they were up by 1 goal with less than 10 seconds left. But a solo goal for TRK after he hit the ball into the ceiling saved this game and this series for Team Falcons, with Ahmad getting the overtime winner in that game to send this series into Game 7. But with just over a minute left, we see TRK get a mistouch on the ball, which gave Venom a bunch of space on offense. And he converts it by squeezing the ball past TRK and Khaled on the goal line to give Twisted Minds a 3-1 lead in this game that Falcons wouldn't be able to come back from. And with this loss, Falcons were officially eliminated from major contention, meaning that this would be the first time ever that they failed to qualify for a major. And now, Twisted Minds had a real shot at qualifying themselves, even if it was a really unlikely one. To qualify for the major, Twisted Minds would need to beat Rule 1 in 3 straight best of 7s. They would need to win the first series of the grand finals, then they would need to win the bracket reset, and after that, they would still only be tied with Rule 1, so they would then have to win a tiebreaker, and only then would they qualify for the major. They got off to a good start by winning Game 1 in overtime, but unfortunately for them, that's as close as they would get. Rule 1 got the wins in Games 2 and 3, with both of them being in overtime. Then Game 4 was a bit more lopsided, with a 5-2 victory, and Game 5 was even more lopsided, with Rule 1 taking the last game of the tournament by a score of 5-0. With that last win, Rule 1 officially locked in their place of the major, being the first team besides Falcons to do so out of this region. And if Rule 1 make it into the top 8 of the major, then they'll overtake Team Falcons to be this region's #1 seed heading into the World Championship. And if they do really well, then they might even have a chance at securing another spot at Worlds for this region as a whole. So I don't know if anybody will be cheering harder for Rule 1 than Twisted Minds. But of course, we'll see how that goes when the time comes. Alright, I don't have much to say for the outro, so I'm just going to once again ask you to join my Discord. It's a lot of cool people in there and we do some fun stuff sometimes, so come join us. And you can find the invite link in the description, just like every other video. It's just waiting for you to click it, so just, do that. But until next time, as always, thanks for watching.